how many LP factions are there nowadays? I believe the factionalism is overrated. There's always been two, with gradations in between. There is the moderates and the radicals. Now, of course, somebody could fall a little bit more towards one than the other, but those are the only two, and they've existed since the beginning of time. A lot of moderates do call themselves pragmatists. Pragmatism is not the same as moderatism. Being moderate, I've said this a million times. Being a moderate is an ideology. Pragmatism is a methodology. They're not the same thing. You can be a pragmatic moderate, but you can also be a pragmatic radical. Methodology is not exclusive to any one ideology, and it makes it confusing because radical, that term, is kind of like the term Jewish. Jewish can be a race where you don't have any religious beliefs at all, but it also can be a religion where you might not have any ethnic Jewish blood. Radicalism is kind of the same way. Radicalism is both an ideology and a methodology. So you can be an ideological radical, but a methodological pragmatist. Anyway, those are the only two factions. If you want to divide it between ideology and methodology, then I suppose you could say the factions would be the radical radicals, the pragmatic radicals, and the moderate pragmatists, because I don't think you could be could you be radical and moderate? I think you could. So then maybe four, but I'd still say there's only two, and it's the two that have always been there. Okay. Since Wikipedia, Daniel says Wikipedia says 5 factions. If you could put into chat, Daniel, the 5, I'd be curious, because maybe I agree. I think they probably would consider anarchists and menarchists separate factions, and I would not. Because maybe no, I would not. Because I know radical menarchists. And there's no such thing as a moderate radical. But I do know radical menarchists. And even Rothbard mentioned that, such as Nock, who wrote The Enemy, Our State. Okay, so Daniel says anarcho-capitalists, classical liberals, green libertarians, I don't know what that is, menarchists, libertarian socialists. Okay, I'm going to make some enemies here. When I say a faction within the party, I mean things that are actually consistent with what the party actually believes. There are libertarian socialists in the party, but they can hate me if they like. It's not consistent with the Libertarian Party. So I don't consider that a faction of the party any more than I would consider libertarian. I'm trying to come up with a term that's not inflammatory, like libertarian monarchist. You know, I wouldn't. Fine, okay, if that's what you believe. I don't tell you people what you believe, but monarchy is not compatible with libertarianism, so that's not a faction. That's just people not understanding. There's absolutely. Now, if you're talking about quote-unquote voluntary socialism, that's not socialism, that's communitarianism, and there's a word for that. It's just called being a libertarian. Socialist moniker not required. As far as anarcho-capitalists, those would be radicals. So classical liberals would be your moderates. I don't know what the green libertarians is. Menarchists could be either moderates or radicals. And libertarian socialists or socialism isn't compatible with the Libertarian Party, but whatever other beliefs they may have, be they anarchist, minarchist, or whatever, they would fall into radical or moderate. So I think my classifications are much cleaner, because those divides are overlapping. And I don't think overlapping, putting forth groups that are overlapping isn't really then factions, is it? And Wikipedia in general is trash when it comes to the Libertarian Party. Let me give you an example. Go look up the Dallas Accord on Wikipedia. That article is trash. Then go look at the edit history and see how that article used to be good. The reason it's trash is because they will not allow the person who had done the most primary research on it to write. And that was me. I've done more primary research on that topic and the statement of principles than anyone presently alive, I believe. But because it's original research, they wouldn't allow it. So they can kiss my libertarian ass. If you want a good article on the statement of principles and the Dallas Accord, go to Lpedia. So Dave says, it's interesting how the radical factions evolved over time. The current iteration seems quite a bit different from the radicals of the 1970s. Yes and no. Interestingly, the 5 points of the current radical caucus were part of the 1970s caucus. The biggest difference is that the 1970s caucus were non-voting. They didn't believe in voting. They were like Wendy McElroy voluntarists. That was the biggest difference. And I think they were probably a bit more left-leaning, but I actually do not think they're as different as I think their differences are less than their similarities. But yeah, there were differences, particularly with the very first iteration. There's been 3 iterations. The second and third are nearly identical. The first one, they were non-voting. And they kind of came in, I think, just to irritate David Nolan when he invited Conklin in. So I did a whole podcast on that. The original, and Dave says the original radicals seem to be anti-party. They were people from SLAM, which was the Student Libertarian Action something. I forgot what the rest of it was. I just got an old pamphlet from them, by the way. I bought it. Yeah, they were very anti-party. And I do think they were there just to be an irritant to David Nolan. If I remember when I clipped this stuff out for like highlight clips, I'll try to put the clip to where I talked about the differences, because I went right into that. Okay, and Daniel says Green Libertarians as an ecologically minded. I don't see that as a separate faction at all. And I could see you be someone being a radical or a moderate. So I have a feeling that whoever put that into that article happened to be somebody where that was their particular wheelhouse or particular obsession and decided to make it a faction. And for some reason, Daniel interpreted something that I said to say the Lockean proviso is not libertarian. Depends on how you define it. I'm not sure what you're getting at with that. That might be an interesting entire episode. So without knowing how you define it, I can't really comment. As I define it, no, it's absolutely libertarian. I do think it's misused a great deal, however. And I think libertarian theology, I almost said theology because I'm so used to religion, ideology has evolved quite a bit beyond Locke. I think Locke had a lot of great ideas, but I don't worship him like Jesus or anything like that. So my understanding of the Lockean proviso is absolutely libertarian, but I've seen some distortions of it. And Elastic Giraffe says, my impression is that there's a lot fewer agorists on the anarchist side and a lot fewer objectivists on the minarchist side. I know a ton of agorists. In fact, Elastic, I just proposed, and I ripped it off from Minnesota, no such thing as IP, thank you very much, an agorism plank, I don't know if it'll pass, to the LPCO platform, because there are so many agorists. The objectivists have pretty much abandoned the Libertarian Party, so there's a lot fewer objectivists everywhere. I don't think I even know a objectivist in the party. Like, I don't think I know one. I mean, maybe I do, and they just don't make a big deal out of it, but I can't think of any objectivists that I know.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to